Hello and welcome to the Kamala Show. Every week we bring you interviews and conversations with technologists, entrepreneurs, filmmakers and other newsmakers from in and around the San Francisco Bay Area. My guest today is John Michael McDonagh. He is a writer and director based in London. He has a new film out called Calvary that stars the Irish actor Brendan Gleeson. Set in Ireland, Gleeson plays a Catholic priest who is going to be murdered by one of his parishioners. That's what we discover in the opening line of the film. We spoke to McDonagh about the making of the film and about the second of his trilogy. His first was called The Guard, which starred Brendan Gleeson, and the third film of this trilogy is called The Lame Shall Enter First, and that also stars Brendan Gleeson. So, how do you pronounce your name?
John Michael McDonagh.
McDonagh.
Yeah.
And that's an Irish name.
That is. Connemara, County Galway is where my father was from. If you ever go there, you'll find McDonagh on a lot of the shops, you know. Not that I'm related to people who own lots of stores, but there's it's a common name in that region.
And your mother is from which county?
She is from County Sligo, where Calvary is filmed, and actually the little town that we shot in, Eastgate, that's where she's from.
So the first film, The Guard, was filmed in your father's hometown, and the second in your mother's hometown. Where is the third going to be filmed? I'm jumping the gun here.
No, there is a link, yeah. The Guard was so successful, my mum got upset, and I said, well, I'll shoot the next one, Calvary, where you're from. But the third one will be where I'm from, which is South London.
Oh, so it's a trilogy.
It's a trilogy, yeah.
Okay. Calvary, for a minute there, I thought I was not reading the name right. I thought it was Cavalry.
Cavalry, yeah. It's not well, it kind of is a Western, but
Yes.
there aren't a lot of horses in it. There's one white horse that appears behind Father James in a scene, but no, it's not about a lot of horses charging through Monument Valley.
Yes, we'll come to Monument Valley. You jumped the gun here. What does Calvary mean for those of us who may not know what that term is? Because when you make a film, from what I've understood, you first settle on the title, you mull on the story for days, and then when you sit down, it just comes, you just pour it into that paper. But what does Calvary mean?
Calvary is literally, it's the site where Christ was crucified on a hill just outside Jerusalem. It's also called Golgotha. But metaphorically, it also refers to the burden you carry. So somebody has gone through a Calvary, they've gone through suffering in some way, and they've undergone it, and they've hopefully come through it, So it's two literary meanings. So it's a place, but it's also a sort of a philosophical idea.
How did you come up with the title? You just wrapped up The Guard, your first film. You're sitting there, both you and your favorite actor, Brendan Gleeson, sitting, and the Catholic Church news was unfolding. For want of a better word, I'm going to say news. And then you came up with this notion of, what about having a good priest who's surrounded by bad men? But how do you come up with the title?
Once I knew it was going to be a film that dealt with lots of religious themes and ideas. So basically, I just started going through a dictionary trying to find, names that had religious connotations. So it's like there'd be Bethlehem, which is where Jesus was born, or something like that. I was like, well, that isn't quite right. And when I came to Calvary, I thought, oh yes, that kind of implies something about the plot. If it's where the hero dies, maybe that's something I can play around with in the script as well. And it's short, so it's always nice to have a short title.
So you actually went through a dictionary, and here I was thinking, maybe you had this great big revelation.
Well, once you have the idea of, death and suffering, that starts to give you ideas.
Okay. I'm going to start with the film's opening line, which is kind of very startling and gets you hooked. I'm going to kill your father. Well, that's certainly a startling opening line, says Brendan Gleeson. And the gentleman who says, I'm going to kill your father, is somebody who has been taken advantage of by a Catholic priest. But there is, you yourself have admitted, the opening line was something you're doffing your hat to Alfred Hitchcock in a way?
Well, the actual opening line is much more specific than that. I first tasted semen when I was 7 years old. That's the opening line. So that's certainly a startling opening line. I'm going to kill you, Father, comes later on. So in that first opening line, you're bringing up a whole history, I guess, of abuse. So if that doesn't make the audience sit up, I don't know what will. What was the second? Hitchcock. The idea in Hitchcock's I Confess, we have the idea of Montgomery Clift is told something in the confessional that he's not, the seal of the confessional, you're not allowed to reveal something that you've been told in the confessional. And I always liked that idea, and I felt that audience who weren't familiar with, like, let's say, Catholicism, have the gist of the idea that, like a lawyer, a priest isn't allowed to say he's been told. So I thought most people, they may not be familiar with Catholicism, but they probably know that, from movies they've seen. So that was the hook for the opening moments.
So this is a layered film where you can access it at different levels. There's the basic story about a good priest who's going to be killed by his congregation that consists of bad people. But then there is the second and third layer, which is very, very interesting. There are references to John Ford in some ways. There are references to spaghetti western. There are literary references. And then I believe you're a fan of Sam Peckinpah.
Yeah, there is a Sam Peckinpah type ending, let's say, a slow motion shootout. There's other filmic references is kind of Preston Sturges. I'm a big fan of screwball comedies, so you could say a lot of the supporting characters are kind of screwball in that way. John Ford is, the use of landscape. We use Ben Bulben and the area surrounding Eastgate, County Sligo in a kind of mythic way, where the characters are kind of overburdened in a way by the landscape. We have an old writer who the priest visits, played by Emmet Walsh, and the priest brings him two books, Jernigan by David Gates, which is about an alcoholic, which is kind of implying that the old man probably was an alcoholic and that's why he's living alone now. And a book called HHHH by Laurent Benet, which was to do with the assassination of Heydrich, a Nazi. And in the film there's a reference where the bar owner says about the church collaborated with the Nazis. So there's like, these are just slightly oblique references that people may or may not get. But, it's nice to have hidden moments in a movie, I think.
And John Ford is an Irish American from the same county as your father. And he went to Monument Valley and you went to the west coast of Ireland. And he showed us the red mountains, the red-hued mountains of Utah. You show us the cold, craggy, cold coast of Ireland. Why?
I think if you get it right, it's almost like it's an added character in the movie. And it makes the film bigger. It makes it mythic, if you do it properly. So instead of making, let's say a small story set in Dublin, there's been too many small stories set in Dublin. I want to make a big story, a film that doesn't feel like a parochial Irish movie. It should feel like a more universal movie. And I think having a landscape like that makes the film seem bigger and more cinematic.
This question is not mine, but I have to give full credit to the American author Joyce Carol Oates. And you nodded your head.
Yeah, she was at we had a kind of tastemakers screening thing in New York, and she was there. I didn't get to speak to her, unfortunately.
But she tweeted, and here is what she tweeted, and I thought I'll ask you the question. Dying to know why wonderful Hoagy Carmichael songs, Hong Kong Blues and Buttermilk Sky, are in Calvary so pointedly.
I like the songs, so I always wanted to put them in the movie. Also, I guess it's, the Emmet Walsh, I guess he's in his 70s, and it's kind of maybe harking back to his youth. He's, he wants to get away from the world, I guess. Maybe he wants to retreat back into his childhood. And these were probably the songs he played when he was young, when he was happy. Because he's not really happy anymore. He's alone on an island, and only the priest visits him. Hoagy Carmichael was one of my favourite singer-songwriters. Hong Kong Blues I always loved.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
You were listening to an interview with director and writer John Michael McDonagh. He has a new film out called Calvary. This is the second film in his trilogy. The first was called The Guard, and the third film is called The Lame Shall Enter First. You can download this and other podcasts from our website or from iTunes. We have a YouTube channel and we also have a Facebook page. And I'm on Twitter. My handle is @Kumbler. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, please feel free to send us an email. And as always, thank you for tuning in.